Why Bokken is effective in a street fight. Bokken is a wooden sword that's used instead of real weapons. Just because it isn't made of metals or has a sharp edge, many think that it's safe to use. But the reality is totally different. The fact is, Bokken is more lethal than a sword. So will Bokken help you in a street fight? Welcome to our platform for combat and martial arts. Today we'll be hovering through the effectiveness of a Bokken in a street fight. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. First, let's give it an introduction. Bokken, a wooden sword. The word Bokken means wooden sword, so the Bokken is a wooden sword that's used in martial arts training. I think this should be clear by now. Bokken is used instead of a real sword with a sharp edge, as you can get hurt pretty badly while training with a real sharp sword. Bokken is used instead of a real sword with a sharp edge, as you can get hurt pretty bad while training with a real sharp sword before Bokken was introduced. It's used in sparring sessions of kendo, iaido, aikido, kenjutsu, jodo, and jujitsu. The very common shape of a Bokken is similar to katana. On the bright side, Bokken is inexpensive and easy to maintain, but it doesn't mean it's ineffective. Even though it's not as mortal as a real sword, you should always be careful. You can seriously hurt your opponent and the people around you if you're not careful with it. Now let's discuss the difference between Shinai and Bokken. Shinai is somewhat less lethal than a Bokken. The reason is Shinai is made out of bamboo, while Bokkens are made of heavier and sturdier wood. The characteristics of bamboo are that it's much more elastic and softer. Shinai is used in the competitions of kendo, which are all about fighting with swords. As all the odds are crystal clear, it's time to discuss the real question: is Bokken effective in a real fight? To find out, we have to dive into the interesting history of Bokken. Bokken is related to Japan, but according to legend, it was designed from a Chinese wooden sword that they used to train their warriors. In Japan, Bokken came to action in the era of the samurai, 1336 AD to 1600 AD. The samurais used to train with Bokken because it helped them in fighting one-on-one without significant damage. But as time passed by, they became deadly weapons in the hands of trained samurai or martial artists. It was then getting used on battlefields instead of a real sword, because swords are not sturdier and can break with heavy usage. So when their katanas would betray them, they would use Bokken instead of that. With Bokken, you can easily bash an enemy and cause significant injury. It can even lead to head trauma if you're not careful with it. And that's the reason why it was getting used on battlefields. Another reason was that Bokken's more lightweight than katanas or any other swords. Plus, in rainy conditions, it'll become much handier. So they would bring Bokken to the battlefield along with their katanas, wakizashi, tanto, etc. Another interesting use of Bokkens is that they were used to ward off intruders or burglars at night. There was a trend in ancient Japan where spilling blood on the bedchamber was considered bad luck, so to protect themselves and their loved ones from intruders and burglars, they would place a Bokken instead of a normal sword. Unbelievable use by Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto has carried the use of Bokken to the next level. He was a ronin who used to fight with one or two Bokkens. He would fight countless enemies with Bokkens. There hasn't been a great legend like him who would use such a beautiful-looking tool as a deadly weapon. There was the story of a duel between Miyamoto Musashi and Sasaki Kojira. According to legend, he was challenged to a duel by Sasaki Kojira. On the morning of the fight, Miyamoto slept overnight and thus woke up late. When he was on his way to the duel on his boat, he used that boat's oar to create his Bokken for the fight. When finally the duel happened, Miyamoto crushed his head with a single blow, even though Sasaki was carrying his large odachi. In simple terms, Sasaki was armed with a really large sword, while Miyamoto only had a Bokken by his side. There may be different versions of the story, but the fact that Musashi used it to crush Sasaki's head is real. But I think we've forgotten our real deal of the topic, and that's, will Bokken help you in a street fight? It's funny how you'd still ask this question. Of course Bokken is very effective in a street fight. You'd need to be careful while using a Bokken against your opponent. The injuries delivered by Bokken are much worse than the normal blunt wooden weapons like clubs, staff, etc. So you've got to be surely careful with it. Most of the time, the injuries it produces are so much worse. Many people would unseen the injuries caused by Bokken while practicing martial arts like Aikido, Kendo, Jiu-Jitsu, etc. Most of the time, the injury won't look deadly from the outside, but the internal injury it causes is incomparable. But to give it another perspective, let's say, can you kill with Bokken? The answer is yes. If you were to hit your opponent on the head, it'll cause head trauma. Just like in the case of a street fight, nobody cares how hard they hit you or where they hit you. But if you're using Bokken in a street fight, you shall always be careful. Because if you hit the other person on the head severely, it might even lead to their death. So the answer is yes, but only in the case of the head. But what about the body shot? Now, if you're not going for the head, you'd most likely use it on their body. One severe hit of Bokken can break bones, fracture them, or cause severe internal bleeding. So in a sparring session, if you get plugged with a Bokken, it's always recommended to visit your doctor, because most of the time these injuries aren't visible. But hold up. Before you use it in a street fight, you should know, is carrying a Bokken legal? Before I even tell you it's legal to use or not, it simply depends on your country's law. In some countries, it's legal to use, while in others, it's illegal to use. Just like in the case with the United States. According to their definition of swords, Bokken is not a sword, so it's legal to use. But neither does it have a metal blade, nor is it sharp to cut someone. So technically, using Bokken is legal to use in the United States. So you can have a Bokken in possession and can even use it in the public space. The last question of our topic is similar to that one, and that's, can you walk around with a Bokken? It might be legal to possess, but can you carry it with you anywhere? If you're passionate to use it in a street fight, you must know if it's okay to carry around only if it's legal in your country. According to different laws, carrying seine swords, switchblades, penknives, etc. are illegal to carry. But what about a wooden stick? Well, precisely, it's not prohibited to carry. Just like a Bokken is a wooden sword, you can carry it around with no restrictions. But to fully understand the fair usage of a Bokken, you shall fully understand your country's law. In the state of California, carrying a wooden sword is completely illegal. As a matter of fact, you can even carry a real metal sword in the state of California. But if you intend to carry a deadly weapon, keeping in mind that you can use it to assault someone, will cost you around $17.5 thousand. So it's indeed a tricky question. With the one, you have to understand your law properly. If you want to use a Bokken in a street fight, always remember to get professional training. It's not something you can learn to use on your own. If you aren't trained professionally, you might severely hurt the other person. With that said, you've reached the end of our video. Do you think Bokken shall be used in a street fight? Now, don't forget to mention your thoughts in the comments section. Lastly, if you admired our video and the research, kindly press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more combat-related interesting videos. We'll see you in the next one.